Hey everybody, hope you're doing. Oh, there he is. That was quick.
I'm known for being super fast.
You are a ninja. You are a ninja.
Welcome back, my friend.
How you doing, buddy?
Belated happy birthday, and hope you enjoyed all your travels.
Yeah, we get to get away for a little bit, which was nice. So yeah, we're gonna let a few people log in here, and today we're gonna be talking about programming for fat loss. And there's a lot of good information out there, but I think at the same time, I think one of the things I've been thinking about is it's not necessarily what to do, but what not to do, because I think there's a lot of people that make just kind of funky decisions on what they're trying to do from a fat loss standpoint. And while yes, nutrition and eating correctly is an absolute necessary component, there are some tweaks and some things that you can do within your programming that will help expedite that process. And that's really what we're going to talk about today. So Eric, I'm gonna kind of start off like we always do, ask you a couple questions. From a programming standpoint, what would you say are the three absolutes, right? What are the three non-negotiables when it comes to programming for fat loss?
Well, and if there's ever a topic we've talked about that I probably changed my mind at least 50 times over the last 25 years of doing this, going back to when I competed in bodybuilding shows, right? And how I look back and say, wow, I wasted a whole bunch of time and money and effort on things that really didn't pay off, from whether it was supplements that I was literally peeing my money away to, to time doing things, or how much, muscle or energy I gave away doing things that really didn't move the needle. And so if I had to pick three things, good question on the spot here. So if a little change of scenery today, coming to you from the Beat Laboratory, from the gym, because I have to run to a team session after this. But what it allows me to do is give you props. You ready, Perry? I got props today. All right. So this is the first thing I do. All right. So in my locker at the gym here that I keep a bunch of equipment and stuff in. I first explain to people, if their goal is to change their body composition, right? And whatever that may mean, is I'm going to say, okay, so if we gain 5 or if we lose 5, is that a bad thing or is it a good thing? And they'll say, well, kind of depends. And so then I hand them these, right? I have this big blob and this big blob. I got these. I forget even where I bought these. I bought these probably 20 years ago, right?
I didn't even know that you had these, which is kind of concerning to me, but we'll talk about that on a later date.
They're very disturbing to look at when you first look at it. When someone holds that in their hand and they see, okay, well, this is metabolically active. This helps to protect our joints. This helps us move, right? And it looks a lot better in a t-shirt than this does, right? This also takes up a lot more space, right? As you can see. So, and this is not metabolically active. Toxins store themselves really well in here. And so with that, we got to figure out, if I gain or lose 5, is that a good or a bad thing? So we have to first set the goalpost. We talk about this in the courses. We have to make sure we have clearly defined goals of what that is, because you may have some people, especially working with fighters, that it doesn't matter where it comes from. They have to get the weight off because they have to make a certain weight. Whereas what we're talking about here is more of an aesthetic change that, ask the question, well, what if you didn't lose a pound, or maybe if you gained a pound, but you look the way you want to look? Would you care? And once you can get that off the table, now you've set your mark, because there are cases where you could actually lose 5 and it may be a really bad thing. Okay, so that's the first thing, is kind of set your mark of where you're at. And then to do that, you need to have some sort of method for testing that. It could be as simple as tape measurements. If you just have a soft cloth type tape measure, and you can look at your waist and your measurements of, generally I'll do waist at the belly button, measurement of the chest, measurement of the arm, possibly the shoulders, possibly the hips, and then the thigh. That way I have some baselines to go on. If I want to get a little bit more involved, then I can get some calipers out and we can actually look at percentages of body fat, so we can see that move, see changes in lean body mass versus fat mass. But that's kind of the first thing I would say is like, you got to know where our end point is, and we got to know where we're starting from, because if not, we don't know if we made any progress, right?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And I love the props, man. I'm still thinking, I'm thinking to myself, we could use those for more stuff. But anyways, and I think it honestly, a lot of people, they know what they're what their end is, like their end goal is, but they don't know where they're starting. And I think that's one of the biggest issues we see with a lot of people. They're like, I want to be here. It's like, well, yeah, well, we all want to be, at our goal, whether it's our goal weight or our goal strength or whatever it is. But you have to know where you're starting from, and you have to have a game plan, because winging it simply doesn't work. And one of the things that, I want to talk about is the difference between fat loss and weight loss. And obviously, yes, a big part of that is dietary. But at the same time, when I'm working with fighters, see, I don't really get into the nutritional component that much, because there's a lot going on there. And there are a lot of people out there that can do it better than I can. But one of the things that I always like to see is, specifically working with, combat athletes, is let's try to lose as much fat as possible while preserving as much muscle as possible. Because, we want to lose fat, right? We don't want to lose muscle. We want to lose fat. Now, obviously, there are times, and I know you can attest to this too, because you've done bodybuilding, where you kind of have to lose a little bit of both, right? Because if you're working in a calorie deficit, you are gonna lose muscle, and you are gonna lose fat. But the key is trying to find ways to optimize that via your diet, especially. That's gonna make a pretty significant change. But let me ask you this, Eric: when you were in that world of bodybuilding, which again is very aesthetic and symmetry based, what were you focusing on from a nutritional standpoint? And then as you got closer to your actual competitions, what were you focusing on from a training standpoint?
Well, that's the thing that I thought of when you started talking about that, when you have to give away a little muscle. So the last show I did, and we're going back almost 25 years now. The last show I did, I gave away probably a lot more muscle than I would have liked to. And I think one of the biggest reasons is because of I not being ready early enough. And what I mean by that is, and I did a post, if you go back to our feed, called Time and Percentages, right? And so if the average person wants to, look a little better, feel a little better, I always say we go by the 80-20 rule, that if you follow everything we tell you to do, whether it's nutritionally, whether it's training wise, and you follow that 80% of the time, the other 20%, you're allowed some levity. So if that 20% means you have a couple bad meals, or you skip a workout here and there, you'll still get there, just at no particular rush. But then if you have and there's two types of people that come in the door, right? There's the people that come in and it's like, I'd like to get there the sooner the better, but I don't have a certain deadline or a date. And then there's your fighters that have a fight date, or a bodybuilder has a show date, or someone's going on a vacation, or I have an athlete with a tryout or the beginning of the season. That date's not going to move whether they're ready or not. And that was in the case of my bodybuilding show, is that I started, I don't know, maybe 20 weeks out, and I was in such crap shape when I started that I had to, as the date got closer and I wasn't ready, I had to go to more dramatic means, which meant I had to really drop my calories and I had to adjust, because I wasn't going to make the weight, and I also wasn't going to be in the shape that I needed to be. Whereas actually, ironically, fast forward now 20 something years, my son is getting ready for his first bodybuilding show next month. And he started in such great shape that he's been able to keep most of his muscle, if not all of it, as he's been dieting, because he didn't start that far off. So that percentage changes depending on the individual in terms of what the levity is. So we talk about it in terms of meals. So if you should be eating, let's say 3 to 4 meals in a day, and you can multiply that over the course of a week, let's just round it up that you're eating somewhere between 25 and 30 meals. So that means that you have 4 or 5 in there that could be not optimal, and you can choose whatever that vice is. But with that, the other 24, 25 got to really be, got to be dialed in. So we could go down a whole rabbit hole with nutrition, but I also put on, one of our posts earlier this week, because all our posts kind of have that theme each week, is that, and there's another one I'm actually putting up today from a research study that shows that, without significant dietary changes, it's hard to really make a change in fat loss just through exercise. Because I know there's been times when I trained my ass off and was, still was not lean. And then there's other times where I trained minimally, but my diet was super tight, and I was. So that's really more of a product of nutrition. And there's actually the chart that I put up, if you guys saw it yesterday, of like, it's a bulk of this comes down to nutrition. Now, there are things you can do with the training, and a lot of things we thought we used to do with the training for fat loss has come to be shown that it's not going to make that much of a difference. Like, the whole concept of doing your cardio in a fasted state. Is it going to move the needle a little bit? That's very, very debatable. And that, even if it does, it's probably going to be a 5% different at most.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the first 95% dialed in, then that 5% you're never going to notice anyway.
Yeah. And honestly, too, you know, when it goes to the idea of fasting, a lot of people think that it will help expedite and significantly expedite that process for fat loss. But one of the things that they don't understand is, let's say you do your cardio, you're doing your extra cardio work for fat loss, but also if you're trying to get in shape at the same time, now you're trying to get in shape in a calorie deficit. And here's the thing, you cannot get an optimal cardiovascular shape from an energy system standpoint in a calorie deficit. You simply can't. So a lot of people think, well, if I do something fasted, I'll burn, you know, I'll lose more weight, I'll lose more fat, but I'll also improve my overall conditioning. And it's like, well, yeah, maybe you'll definitely, if you're doing some zone 1 and zone 2, there's obviously benefits from a physiological standpoint of those zone 1 and zone 2 adaptation from building your aerobic base. But if you're looking to try to do high intensity training in a fasted state and you're pretty much depleted of all your glycogen, you're going to perform at a pretty low level. And like you said, there's a little bit of research out there that says it could help. But again, like you said, if the big rocks aren't there, those other little ones aren't going to make a difference. So one of the things I want to do is I want to change gears a little bit and, talk about a couple other things that I've noticed and experienced over the years is that with a lot of the individuals that I've worked with in the past, and a lot of the times when people come in and they have the lose 5-pound goal, or they have these aesthetic goals, and there's nothing wrong with those goals. They get very, very almost overly almost anxious about losing that weight, and trying to get those body comp changes that they're striving for. But here's what else I've noticed is that when someone comes in and they're like, hey, you know, my goal is to lift this amount of weight, or they have performance-based goals. Here's the cool thing. I would say 80% of the time when I work with clients and their main goals are performance-based, they get the aesthetic changes as a byproduct, also known as like the what the hell effect, right? So they're trying to deadlift heavy, squat heavy, maybe they're getting ready for a powerlifting meet, and all of a sudden what they're doing is they're dialing in their focus and their effort on these performance-oriented goals. And then they realize, hey man, if I don't fuel right for these specific goal-oriented things, I'm not going to get the performance goals that I'm looking for. And then you get that subtle shift of like, hey, now I need to change my diet because I have to fuel differently to help with performance. And those changes in the diet actually equate to aesthetic changes and body composition changes. So it's kind of a little bit of a reverse way to go about it, but I've seen it time and time again.
Well, I'm going to go a different angle with that. So since I deal with a lot of athletes, where you can, obviously there's always that little bit of vanity in all of us. And that's, you know, that's something we need to face and understand that's okay. But also if we look at fat loss, there's also a component of fat loss for performance. So that big yellow blob, you know, this stuff, I tell everybody, it doesn't move that fast, right? And so if we want to get faster and we want to improve your speed, one of the first things we do is we got to get you leaner. And so we've been able to improve performance dramatically just because you're not as weighed down by that stuff. And so not only are you going to move faster, but there's less stress on your joints. Okay. And then they've even done some research where they found that nerve conductivity, like nerve impulses, will go faster through lean tissue than it will through fat. And so we're talking about maximizing your nervous system for performance. You know, those are just a couple of reasons why we would look for fat loss, not just from a look good in your gene standpoint, but also from an actual performance standpoint. Now, there's some interesting things about metabolism that, you know, if you listen to anybody on the internet and social media talk about metabolism, what they actually know versus what is real, you know, is a huge discrepancy. And so there's a great book, you know, and I'm always recommending books, as you know, in our course. We have a reading list that we give out to people because we probably rattle off 30 different books that we reference. There's a book by someone by the name of Herman Ponzer, and the book is called Burn. And what he did is he went and studied these native tribes, right, that weren't exposed to Western culture, and looked at true metabolism and looked at the impact that, you know, activity and movement has, and a lot of assumptions that we make. And a lot of times what we look at is we just look at that little flashing light on the on the treadmill, or we look at our Apple Watch or whatever device you're using, and you're looking at how many calories you think you burned. I'd hate to break it to you, but that's not really dialed in. All right, it's a little closer if it's a device that's geared towards you. You know, like if I'm wearing a Morpheus strap, or if I'm wearing, something, like that, that's gauging the calories. But those are not going to be 1,000% accurate, because here's the thing: is that caloric burn has a hormonal component. So, like, let's say you're super stressed, right? We know that can change your metabolism. You could slam on your brakes to avoid a squirrel on the way to the gym, right? And your cortisol elevates, and that's going to change your metabolism. So, like, trying to match up calorie for calorie of, hey, I burned 200 calories on the bike, now I can go eat a 200-calorie meal. It doesn't work that way in terms of trying to do that math, right? So what we're looking to do is it's really about accumulative over time, right? Do I create that deficit? And most of the research shows that about a 500 calorie window of a deficit is about the max you can do without starting to sacrifice some of the things you talked about, without sacrificing a bunch of your performance and muscle and so forth. So to kind of guess and be best around that, you have to have an idea what your intake is. And then your output, again, is somewhat tough to read, but then you have to kind of get an idea of that. So the bigger key is the consistency over time, because some days that window may be smaller than others. And so that consistency has to change. And then even within your intake, that should change a little bit based on whatever your output is going to be that day. I'm going to need a little more calories if I got a heavy deadlift day versus a day I'm doing light zone 2 work, like you mentioned before. So I gave one of my top 3. I never finished the next 2. I got them still bouncing around my head, but I want to get your number 1. What's number 1? I come into your facility. I want fat loss as my primary goal. I want to look better. What's like first box we got to check on that checklist?
I mean, obviously, we know that the nutrition component is king, right? But and we did a post about this earlier in the week. It's about inefficiency of movement, and I've seen this in the world, in my world of jujitsu. I've also seen it in the world of corrective exercise, in the world of just exposing people to new training modalities. And anytime you are challenging yourself, and this can be on several different fronts. This could be from a neurological standpoint, when you're studying really, really hard and all of a sudden you just get super, super hungry because you're burning through that glycogen, or you're trying something that's really challenging for you. And that could be balance drills. It could be learning a new skill or something like that. Or it could be just changing something up from what you're currently doing. We talk all about stress and adaptation in our course, and how to make a viable and sustainable changes in your training and your programming. But, it's one of those scenarios where if you just take up something new that you've never really done, you're going to have a great metabolic effect on that. And I use the idea of running. You get runners, right? People that they go out and they run 3, 4, 5, 6 miles. And what happens is, there's only a few different ways that we can really improve their sort of overall conditioning, right? One way is to simply by doing just overall more volume. But the problem with that is you just can't keep on adding volume and volume and volume in this linear fashion. Obviously, a good coach can start to dissect someone's program, and they can have, days specifically with running, shorter days, medium distance and long distance days. But, you get that runner that they're really good at running, but they've never swung a kettlebell. Maybe they've never pushed a sled. Maybe they've never used battling ropes, or maybe they've never done a ski erg or a rower, right? They're really good at that one modality, but they're so efficient that they're not really challenged from a metabolic standpoint. And then all of a sudden you give them something new and they're sweating like crazy and they're just completely gassed. So I think just changing your training modalities and getting exposed to something that you're either new at or not good at, I think that's something that is really, really significant. And this is something that I actually see in my world of combat sports. A lot of people will start jujitsu and they'll lose a ton of weight. And it's simply because they're consistent, right? But they're doing something that they're really not good at. And if you're consistently doing that, you're going to have a really, really big metabolic effect. But I will say this, in the world of jujitsu, you're flirting with fire there, because yes, you can use jujitsu as a style of obviously challenging yourself, but at the same time, it's not the most joint friendly sport, right? I mean, if you've talked to anybody that's been in that world, you know that there's going to be tweaks, twinges, etc. So I'm not saying go do jujitsu, right? My point is that go try something that you haven't done, or try a new training modality, or just honestly, don't be afraid to suck at something for a little bit. I think a lot of people do what they do what they're good at, right? You know, that's why guys go in on Mondays and do chest, and you know, a lot of other people go to the row of ellipticals. So a long-winded answer is try something that you're not good at, and be willing to be inefficient at something for a while.
There was an article years ago, and it shows you how many years ago because it's probably terribly politically incorrect now. But there was an article I remember reading many years ago. It's called the chunky aerobic instructor syndrome, and it hit home because I had a couple of the group of fitness instructors in the big box facility I work with, and they were the hardest people to get lean because if they were teaching 4, 5, 6 classes a day, like. They you know, if you get that person on an elliptical or a rower, like their body laughed at them. They were so economical and efficient that it was going to take something dramatically different in their training to do that. And usually that one thing for a lot of people, because they generally assumption is that, you know, lifting weights and strength training builds muscle and cardio makes you lose fat, right? I need to start running. I need to do that kind of thing to lose fat. Where everybody that you talk to who really knows their stuff and who does a good job with it, from, you know, Alan Cosgrove is awesome in some of his stuff that he does, or anybody else, they'll tell you the first thing you need to have is you need to have a concern for muscle. That doesn't mean you need to be a bodybuilder, but you need to build some lean body mass. Now, some of the other things that have changed over the years and with the science is originally some of the things that was pretty common talk in our circles was that every pound of lean tissue burns about 30 to 70 calories throughout the day. That's somewhat become debatable, and especially if you read Ponser's book. But with that, we do know that having metabolically active tissue, lean muscle mass, is important. And on the dramatic side, if you look at anorexics or bulimics, when they do autopsies on them, they're actually clinically obese in terms of body fat percentages. Right, because they've given away, your body will give away the muscle tissue because it's not economical to keep that. Right, if we were surviving in the wild and your body doesn't get food, first thing it's going to give away is the muscle, because it takes more energy to carry around muscle than it does for body fat. And then also understanding that, kind of going down that theme, is that all these cellular mechanisms that control all these things in our body, these were designed way before there was gyms and ellipticals and, you know, all that kind of stuff. And so our whole system is made to survive another day. And so with that, everything we want to do to look like a magazine cover goes completely contrary to human physiology, right? Human physiology is that if you were a jacked, super lean, you know, carved up caveman, you were dead, right? Because if you didn't know when you were going to get your next meal. And so because of that, if you could, you know, get rid of unnecessary muscle, and if you could burn the least calories possible, you could walk along the plains for the longest amount of time. You could go the longest without food in case of drought, or in case of you know, lack of availability. So everything we want to do to look like a magazine cover goes against our own human physiology. So you have to kind of go to some extremes, and then that goes back to your percentages. What extremes are you willing to make? You know, you could look, you know, the way I looked for a bodybuilding show, I looked like that for about a day. And, you know, and so with that, to keep that up, you know, do you want to make those sacrifices? Do you want to do what I had to do, was going to family parties with a cooler bag filled with grilled chicken breasts while everybody else was eating pasta and all the other good stuff, right? So that's a miserable, miserable life. Now, I did it for, you know, for a short period to say I did it, but that's not a consistent, sustainable model. So looking at that in terms of, you know, the ability to be consistent, and I guess the theme kind of that we start winding down is it's always going to be consistency over intensity. That I'd rather have you do something, and Cosgrove actually mentioned something he started doing with his clients. I'd rather look at your total steps for the day as opposed to, you know, your calories burned in a isolated cardio session, right? Which makes a ton of sense. And there's been research that showed when they took people who did 3 10-minute bouts of cardio throughout the day as opposed to 1 30-minute bout, though not only did they get the same effects physiologically, but they ended up having much longer adherence. And that means they kept doing it, right? Because when you're looking at the barrel of looking down the barrel of a half hour, and I'm a mom that has kids that I got to get to 8 different practices and recitals and tutors and everything else. And I got to figure out where I'm going to get a parking spot at the gym to get changed and then get showered and then get back and be able to make dinner. Like, half hour may be daunting, but if a 10-minute walk after work and a 10-minute walk before work and a 10-minute walk at lunch is doable, you add up those steps, and cumulatively it's going to make a huge impact and move the needle.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, I want to close on something you said earlier, because there's absolutely a parallel between bodybuilding and training mixed martial artists and getting them ready. You had mentioned that you kind of had to somewhat rush the process because you weren't in the condition you were looking to be at and at the weight you were looking to be at. So at a certain point, you have to go into almost this extreme sort of fat loss calorie deficit mode. And when you do that, you are giving up something else. So when you all of a sudden go from this normal sort of, calorie expenditure, calories in, calories out scenario, and then you have to drop a ton of weight really, really quickly, you are leaving so much on the table because of the fact that you're having to rush. And I always say this to, to the fighters that I work with, hey, listen, I don't want you walking around so heavy that if you get a short notice fight, you have to cut 30 pounds in 2.5 weeks, because yes, maybe you can make weight, but you're not doing anything from a performance standpoint that is going to be beneficial for you. All you're doing is just losing weight, and you're going to be snacking on chicken breast and spinach for forever. And then obviously you're doing all your water loading and everything else. But it's the difference between finishing up your camp or finishing up your prep in really good shape that is repeatable and sustainable versus rushing the process. And I always say there's a difference between a fight camp and a fat camp. And if you walk around too heavy and you get a short notice fight or you get a great opportunity, guess what's going to happen? You're going to be rushing that process, and there's no way that you're going to be able to peak your conditioning, your skill set, all of your tactical work in a calorie deficit, because you're going to be so damn hungry, and all you're going to be focusing on is losing weight. And that is not the best philosophy and style to get in the best physical shape of your life. And you mentioned the same thing with bodybuilding. If you do it in a slow and sustainable way, you're going to maintain more muscle, you're going to lose fat in more of a consistent, sustainable fashion, and then you're going to get the results that you're looking for. But it's, rushing that process, it's not going to happen. And honestly, you're probably not going to perform as well on stage, and you're definitely not going to perform as well in the cage.
It's funny, I have the same conversation with my athletes, and I know even for myself, the best way to get lean in a confined period of time is don't get real fat in the first place, right? So that's easiest. Now, if you're already there, right? Well, now what do we do about it? You're going to have to set your expectations that this is going to be a little bit longer road, because if you're setting it up where you're going to shoot for this deadline and you're going to give away a lot of stuff, that yo-yo is a tough ride to get off of, right? And so there's a whole bunch of reasons why I want to make this sustainable, where you don't really notice big changes in your training. And the main thing is to keep you training. And then the last piece is, and we talked about, in last week when I was talking about the costs of training, is that we also have to make sure that whatever we're going to do, whether it's the strength training or it's the cardiovascular training, and the post yesterday talked about the difference between low steady state training versus high intensity training, where if you equal out the calories, if I burn 500 calories in a Tabata class, which we'll go on, we can go on a whole nother rant like we do in the course, where you're not really doing a Tabata class. That's not what that is. You're bastardizing what it is. But anyway, let's for argument's sake, say I took that class, right? And then on the other side, I just went for a slow jog or a bike ride, right? But if you total up the calories, if you could actually get an accurate read on your caloric expenditure, and you burn 400 doing this, 400 doing this, in terms of overall fat loss, it doesn't matter, because it just comes down to that energy balance at the end. And there's not one that's more beneficial to the other. Like there used to be a thought process that is now getting kind of debunked, that I always learned from the first 20 years, is learning about this, what they call EPOC, which is excess post oxygen consumption, where you would have this afterburn of training. And they're now starting to realize that it's not quite what we thought it was. Now, are there hormonal effects that could be benefit, especially from strength training and having concern for muscle? Yes, that's totally the case. But when you equal it out and you do that stuff, and you say, okay, well, So which one should I do? If it's 400 of this versus 400 of this, well, A, your time is the biggest consideration. B, what do you have space and equipment for? And C, most importantly, what are you really capable of doing, right? So if I'm going to go into that HIIT class and I can't touch my toes and I have achy knees and bad shoulders, and they're going to make me do a boatload of burpees, that's not a good option, right? And so, because yes, I will have burned a few calories, but at the end of it, I will have broken myself. And now I'm going to miss tomorrow's class, which I'd rather have you take, 2 walks will be at 400 calories is way better than one workout that you burn 500, right? If you just look at the accumulation of all of it. So that's where we have to take everything in terms of all the costs involved into it, and realize that it doesn't have to be a mutually exclusive decision either, that they're a good training program. Joel Jamieson does a great job of talking about how you ebb and flow your intensities based on your readiness for that day, and where you'll do, the most common low-hanging fruit is just to do 2, 2, and 2. 2 really high days, 2 moderate days, 2 low days. And then you can figure out the rest in terms of how you match up your calories, how you match up your recovery to that. And it's a very simple method that can get a whole bunch of results.
Absolutely. No, it's one of those things too, where this is, and we cover a lot of this in our course as well. And we talk about the various components of putting writing a program. And, it's one of those things where, we've been doing this for quite some time, but there is a structure in a way that you can design your programs to, 1, be more efficient, 2, to maintain more muscle, which is from a metabolic standpoint is going to be more advantageous. So, and we talk a lot about this in our program, because a lot of people simply just don't understand how to lay things out from the most important thing to the least important thing based off of where they're at, because there's so many different questions that need to be asked as far as, someone just saying, well, I want to be here. And it's like, whoa, yeah, we all want to be at a certain place, but there are so many questions to ask before we can give the most optimal answers. So, guys, we're going to be launching our online course here, and hopefully within the next few weeks, we're going to have this thing live. We're really excited about this. If you guys have any questions, any things you want us to cover, feel free to reach out, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. We're going to share this in a little bit. Eric, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, we also working actually up until we jumped on here on getting our website ready to launch in the next week or so. That will also give you the ability to sign up for our first live course, which is going to be Sunday, May 1st in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We're going to be doing that, and we have a ton of stuff coming up. Keep tuned every Friday at 1 o'clock for one of these. We have different topics each week. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about the shoulder, and things you got to consider with that, whether you have a shoulder problem or you want to optimize your shoulders. What do you do with that in terms of training? We got one on kettlebells coming up, which speaking of which, another plug for a big event. Mike, tell us a little bit about what you got going on for a kettlebell event up at your place.
Yeah, so as many of you know, last year about this time I was diagnosed with colon cancer. It ended up being stage 3 colon cancer. And on March 26th at my facility here in North Chelmsford, Mass, we're going to be having a charity event, and all of the proceeds are going to be going towards the Colorectal Cancer Alliance. Basically, what we're going to do is there's 2 ways that you can attend or contribute. The first way is we are going to be doing a kettlebell seminar, and with this seminar, it's going to be myself, both of our good friends, Brett Jones. Brett is a phenomenal kettlebell instructor. He's the guy that taught me. He's going to be coming up from his home to teach a course with myself and one of my other good friends, Derek Chrysler. And we're going to do a kettlebell seminar. We're going to teach you guys the basics on that. And it's going to be followed by a really, really good, yummy dinner from my good friend's restaurant. And that's Red Bones Barbecue, located out of Boston. These guys are phenomenal. So we're going to have 30 spots for the kettlebell seminar and the dinner. And actually about half of those are already taken. And then we've got another option to just do dinner, and also to be part of a silent auction and a raffle that we have. We've got some pretty incredible offerings and prizes. The guys over at Anchor are going to be donating 2 Anchor units, which is equivalent of like $1,500 worth of product. Perform Better is going to be sending us gear. We've got individuals donating cases of wine. We've got gift baskets. We've got med spa things. You name it. We've got so many things every single day. People are willing to donate stuff. We've got a weekend getaway up in New Hampshire. I mean, we've got so many things that are going to be a lot of fun, and hopefully you guys can make it. And really, all of these proceeds are going to be going towards the colorectal cancer alliance to help families that are in need of financial assistance because someone in their family has been impacted by colon cancer. And at the same time, a lot of the proceeds goes towards raising awareness, et cetera. So that's going to be March 26th. If you actually check out the link in my bio, you can go ahead and sign up for things. And also on that event page, which is on Facebook, you're going to see a list. And every day we're adding to that list of the different raffle items and all the different things that you can come in and bid on. And we can go from there. So, a little plug for that, but I appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting us. But we're going to be doing some other stuff soon here, and we appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to you soon.